The adventurers search farther into the forest. They find a stinking bog. They realize that this is part of their quest. They enter this treacherous place, looking for a hillock with a dark altar and a ring of claw-like stones. They search through this bog and finally come across this evil altar. What will they find there?
Hey crafters, you all kind of seen those kind of throwaway styrofoam containers, and I'm going to utilize this in the craft, right? Because it has some really good properties I'm going to show you later on. So what I need to do is I need to get a workable piece of this, right, which is the top of the lid. The sides are pretty small and not so workable, so I'm just going to cut those off, and I'm going to save the top of this lid, and that's what I'm going to use to start the craft. Now that I've got that lid cut, I'm going to use this empty staple box as part of the craft also. It was going to get thrown away, so it's going to now become part of the craft. I'm going to trace around it, and you want it actually larger than the box, so this is perfect, just tracing around this box here. And this will be the top of the altar. And it takes pen really well, that styrofoam clamshell. So I'm going to trace around the edge, and that's going to give me the edge of the altar, and I'll do the same around the other three sides. This is where the magic of this material happens, right? And this is great because we're using a recycled material and not throwing it in the trash. Okay, so now I'm going to measure from the center here, just a little bit off the center, and yeah, just a 1/4 of an inch there. And that's going to be kind of a center for the altar. And then I'm going to do like a skull, kind of just work it into the foam. And the great thing about this foam is it takes pen really well, actually much better than like foam core or styrofoam because it's not as thick, right? So it takes the details really well, but doesn't like, you know, rip like styrofoam or foam core that you have to be super careful. Okay, so I'm just adding all these cool details, just embedding them in the foam with just an ink pen. That's all I'm doing. And I did like a bar through the center with like strange runes and just, you know, varied the marks essentially in the center. And like when you paint this, you're really not going to be able to tell. It's just going to look exactly like runes. And I'm just drawing some edging here and just having fun with it, you know, going for like a, you know, kind of a creepy theme. And the colors are really going to set this off when we get to that point. A few cracks in the altar there. So finish this up. Now that that top is done, I'll move on to the sides here. And I'm going to kind of do the same thing with the channels for the runes here. I'm just eyeballing it. I'm not really measuring it. And just kind of drag the pen willy-nilly through there, you know, make some fun runes. I'm not really specifically copying some script or something. They're small enough that it's really not going to matter. Just kind of drag the pen back and forth to make some fun runes. A little more embellishment here. That spiky embellishment. Some cracks. So, yeah. And like I say, it just takes that texture really well. And it doesn't shred like, you know, styrofoam or foam core can if you get a little too excited with it. Okay, now it's also super easy to cut out. No foam cutter needed. You just use your scissors and you're good to go. So, cool. Lots of great detail. So it just couldn't be easier. Then I'm just going to kind of score that edge there, and I'll just make it really easy to bend. So then I can just bend those flaps over the altar itself, or the, you know, staple box, which is to become our altar of evil. Just bend that over. It fits right on there. Awesome. So cool. Alright crafters, now let's assemble this. So I'm going to shove some paper towels in the box just to make sure that it doesn't kind of collapse on me, right? And then I'm going to put some hot glue on the edges there. And just glue the flaps together. Because I want it to be solid. I'm never going to have to open this again. So there we go. Make that a solid box. Perfect. Wipe off any excess. And we're good to go. So I'm going to put this over the top, and it should fit perfectly on it because it's actually, I made it a little bit bigger than the box by tracing around it. So there we go. Got the top all set. Now that's set, I'll get the sides. Same thing, just hold them down for a second or two, and we'll be good to go. So I just finished this up, and I'm all set. Wow, look at that transformation from that just that plain box to this cool altar. Neat. Hey crafters, I want to strengthen and protect the foam, and I'm going to use this stuff called Bounce. It's from Hotwire Foam Factory, and this will give a nice coat covering this altar. So I'm going to brush a couple of coats of the Bounce on, and I'll put one coat on, and then I'll let it dry, and then I'll put another coat. And this will give a nice protection to the altar. You also want to make sure you don't get too heavy with the coats, right? Because you don't want to cover up all this detail that you spent the time putting on there, right? The Bounce also has a little bit of flex and give to it, so if you put this on styrofoam, it won't kind of mar the surface. If you hit the surface or something, it'll kind of reflect or bounce off the aggressiveness on the surface and won't leave a mark. So that's kind of neat about this. Like other coats might be damaged, but this tends to resist that kind of stuff by bouncing you off the surface. Wah wah. So I thought it'd be really cool to have kind of pillars on the edge of the altar, right? So I'm going to start with these foam shapes. And these foam shapes are great because they come in all different shapes and sizes. And they take glue really well, they take paint really well, and you can just do all kinds of little accents with these things, right? They're so cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim the corners of the altar, right? And then I'm going to use a small cylinder from the foam shape. So I'm going to hot glue 2 of those together, so 4 of those. And then I'm going to glue them to the corners just with hot glue. They take hot glue very well. Just glue them to the corners. Now I'm going to embellish the tops with these skull beads. These skull beads are super useful to have. If you don't have some of these, pick them up. You can see my link below. They're really useful. I'm also going to use spike beads, okay? And I'm going to damage one of the spikes with this wire cutter. So just one of them will be look like it's damaged. And I'll just glue the skulls and the spikes to the foam cylinders with E6000, or you could use styro glue if you want also. In the description of the altar, it has these stones ringing it, right, that kind of look like claws coming up from the ground. And I was really, really inspired by that. And since I thought it was a necromantic altar, that I could have like the claws look like skeletal stone fingers coming up from the ground. And so I was so inspired by that. So kind of looking at your own hand, right? You notice you have different size fingers, and your thumb, of course, is a different size and width. So I wanted to kind of go with that as far as doing this build, right? So I got this inch thick styrofoam, and then I kind of measured out an inch fingers and thumb. I made the middle finger longer and that kind of thing. So I made the fingers different sizes, kind of, mimicking the size of the fingers on your hand, right? And then I did like a rough outline, like to make them skeletal. And so this would be my guide for cutting them out of the styrofoam. To cut this out of the styrofoam, I'm going to use my Hotwire Foam Factory sculpting tool. And I really like it because it's really light and nimble. It's one of my favorite sculpting tools. You can find it and link below the video if you'd be interested in picking up one yourself. Also, make sure you get the tensor. That's the black piece on the sculpting tool. It helps keep the 2 arms apart, and it's kind of really something that's needed with the tool. If you want to keep the arms apart, you can hold them apart with your fingers, but I much prefer the kind of tensor piece. And here we go, crafters. I'm start cutting these out. Just carefully kind of cut around the piece, and then just trace around that line I drew, like the skeletal line. And of course it's going to be way too fat. And I'm just using regular styrofoam here. This is just regular packing styrofoam. You can just use it. It's just trash. But we're going to strengthen this up in the video later, so make sure you check that out. And just kind of sculpt the general shape there. And take off the edges. So really going for that kind of skeletal finger look, right? You kind of want the divots between the bones, right? And just take your time on this. I'll cut the joints. Oh, that is going to be so cool. And I'm just going to round those off a little bit. Just be careful. And with this tool, it's very nimble, so it's really easy to do this. Because this regular styrofoam, it eats this stuff up like crazy. So, don't make the power too high. And there we go. We got our knuckle joints and the finger. Oh, that's going to be so great. Now that I have the parts cut and shaped, I need to put these together, right? And I'm going to use my Sure Bonder. And the great thing about the Sure Bonder is it has a low temp setting, so this won't melt this delicate styrofoam, right? And just kind of blend it in a little bit for extra strength. let that harden up. Then I'll put the last part of the finger on, and we want to kind of curve it like a claw, right? Like it's grabbing towards the center of the altar. So this is going to be so cool. Wow, awesome. Now we'll let that harden up, move to the next step. Here I have a base like I made in my jungle plant scatter terrain video. I'm just going to glue the finger on there and just kind of reinforce the joints. And we are ready for the next step. I want to reinforce the styrofoam, as you know, it'll easily break, so we need something to do that. I'm going to use this stuff called Bounce that I got from Hotwire Foam Factory, and it's really cool. It gives a nice flexible coat, but it covers the object and protects it, and also makes it much harder. So I have a technique that I'm going to combine it with that will make it even more solid. For the coat on the claws, I'm going to use this just play sand, right? And here is my finished model. And I'm going to paint the Bounce on, paint it on the styrofoam, cover it all up. I'm not going to paint the base. And let's cover that all up. And once I have that covered up, nice coat on there, I will pour the play sand on it, and then it'll adhere to it and make a really nice coat, really strong coat. It's kind of like cement, you know, it's the aggregate that makes it strong, right? Here are all 5 done and covered, and wow, look at that. I set them up like the, you know, the kind of like the claw hand, and that is so cool. I'm really happy with this. All right, now what you're going to want to do is when that dries, you're going to want to hit it again with the Bounce, and that'll give it a really solid coat because it'll mix in, it'll cover that sand and kind of mix in with it and just give you a really strong top coat. I want to cover the base of the claw here, so I'm going to use my Elmer's glue all and then kind of paint it on there. And this glue is a little more viscous, so it'll help hold this bigger aggregate sand on here, the construction sand. I'll just cover that with the construction sand and let it sit. You guys know me, I'm always trying new things, right? So I thought I'd use this acrylic gesso, which, you know, you'd use to prime canvases, but you can use it on other things too. And I thought it'd be nice to actually prime all this stuff with the gesso as opposed to spray paint. You know, some people may not have access to the spray paint, or it's, you know, it's stinky, or it's messy, right? You need a space where you can do the spray paint, or it's cold, or the weather's bad. So I was trying out this stuff and it worked really well. It worked nicely on the claws, which I assumed it would, but it also worked nicely on the altar too with the plastic bits and everything. So I was really happy with the coverage of it, and like I say, it doesn't have the smell or the mess of the spray paint. So this might be a great alternative for you guys who don't want to use spray paint, or just don't have the space, or, you know, don't want to breathe the fumes. I thought a blue-gray would be a nice accent to this, you know, the black. So I dry brushed some on, and yes, you just put the paint on the brush and remove most of the paint, and then you want to just a little bit on the surface. And really what that does is it kind of brings out the details, right? It highlights those details without covering the surface too much. So you're not really changing the basic color of the material. You're just kind of bringing out the accents and giving some highlight. I wanted to add a nice accent to the altar, and I thought that this bright red would be kind of neat, like color in the runes that surround the altar would be really cool. Now you see it's really, really bright right now, but it's going to mute a bit. You could even go over this again if it mutes too much, but the red tends to mute on darker colors, so that's kind of a cool effect, but it can also be too much. So if it is too much, just add another application of the red. Also, what I'm going to do is, I didn't want to just have this straight red band, so what I did is I kind of dry brushed over the runes themselves with the black gesso, and that re-accented the details on the altar, so it made it really stand out really cool. Also, I hit a little bit with the dry brush of the gray-blue, just to give it a bit of a highlight, and we are done with that, so very cool, very cool. I also want to bring the same cool accent onto the claws, right? So I kind of dry brushed the tips of the claws that red, and really cool. I think that really has a neat effect and really makes those pop. As the altar is in a swamp, I kind of wanted the claw-like stones to be, kind of had muddy bases, right? So I painted them with a burnt sienna and then kind of a darkish tan. And you'll see why I did this in a sec. So I got all the bases painted up, let that dry, and then I gave it a nice black wash, and that really darkened that up, as you can see. So if I'd have made it darker, you know, that would have, you know, suddenly became really dark. So that's why I painted it the lighter color, and gave a really nice effect. Whew, this is a super long build. We finally made it to the end. The last thing we're going to do is use this black glitter glue, right? You might think that's a little weird, but it's going to be really cool. It'll give a little bit of a sparkle. Yeah, but a muted sparkle, right? Because it's like a black glitter, and it's going to look really cool on the piece. You're just going to get that hint. Kind of the thing I'm going for is that hint of magic, and you just brush this on, kind of squirt some on there, brush it on, just cover the piece, let it dry, and you'll have that little teeny bit of sparkle on there. Also, we're going to do it with the altar itself. So just squirt it on the altar and spread it out. It'll look really cool. It really gives this kind of magical effect that I'm really falling in love with glitter glues.
An earthen mount rises from the muck. Tall, twisted standing stones form a ring on the center of the mound, like some misshapen stone claw. The mysterious rocks encircle an ancient stone altar of black rock carved with strange, barely decipherable symbols. A mirror shard lies on the altar's surface. A palpable feeling of evil and dark magic radiates from the entire area, the black altar in particular.
Let's do a little recap on the altar build, right? So we had a nice little shortcut there using the box and staple box stuffed with a paper towel, and they gave us a nice starting point. Also, the clamshell foam that we used really holds the details well, and you'll find it's really nice because it doesn't kind of shred or tear like styrofoam or foam board. So I really like this stuff, and I'm really been starting to use it in my projects. Also, the bounce coating was a nice reinforcement on the piece, but it still really held the details, so I'm really happy with that. The foam shapes and the beads gave a nice final detail to this altar. I really like how that came out. Also, the black acrylic gesso is a nice alternative to spray paint. If you don't want to use spray paint or you really can't, the weather kind of thing, you could really use this black gesso to paint stuff like this, right? And also the black glitter glue that I used gave a nice variation to the surface color. It kind of hints of magic, and I really like that little sparkle that it gives it. I'm really happy that these stones came out looking like a clawed skeletal hand. I think that's really, really cool and really fits the theme of this, right? The Hot Wire Foam Factory sculpting tool was great for this because, you know, you need that kind of nimbleness when you're sculpting this stuff, and a big bulky tool would have been a little harder. So kudos to the Hot Wire Foam Factory sculpting tool. Also, the bounce worked great on these because, you know, once I sprinkled it with the sand and then covered it again, it gave it a really nice sturdy coat that protects this and keeps it from breaking. The weighted bases made from the TP and the sand give it a nice weight so that things don't fall over because they tend to be light, you know, made out of this really light styrofoam. And once again, I really want to say how much I like that black glitter glue sprinkled on there. It just gave like a light touch of kind of a magic on there, like a sparkle, just barely a hint of a sparkle, but it really looks cool. I'm really happy with how all this came out. There were a lot of great techniques in this video, and I'd love to hear what your comments are on the build, and also if you have any questions, I'd love to hear those also. So make sure to comment below. So I hope you guys really like this build, and I've got more coming up with Shadows of the Dusk Queen, so stay tuned.
And I really want to thank Cobalt Press for sponsoring this video, and because I just love the module, and I was just so happy to team up with them. Also, you're going to want to check out their website because they have amazing materials for gamers like you and I. Make sure to like and share the video so we can introduce as many people as we can to the wonderful world of game crafting. Make sure to leave any questions or comments below the video. I read all the comments and answer all the questions. So yeah, make sure to do that if you have any questions about techniques or anything about the video, or just want to make a comment. Also, wait, one last word from me. Hey craft friends, I hope you liked the video. If you did, make sure to give me a like. Also check out my Patreon. That goes a long way to helping me support this channel. I buy new equipment with it. I bought new equipment and I buy supplies and all that kind of stuff, and it really helps me be the best I can making videos for you guys, and that is so appreciated, you guys that have joined the Patreon and supported the channel. Now there's just some small levels. $1 level a month is just you get extra content that I put on my Patreon from DN Scotty. Also, if you do the $5 level, you get your name in a video. So thank you so much for that support. I really appreciate it. There's also another way you can help support the channel, and that's using my affiliated links. And how that works is when you go through a link and buy something that I suggest for the craft, then I get a little bit of a kickback, and there's no extra cost to you guys. So if you just go to those links and purchase stuff through those links, and maybe stuff you're going to buy anyway, you don't even have to buy the thing that's on the link. You can go there and then buy something else. I get a little bit of kickback on it, and that goes a long way to supporting the channel too. And thank you everybody that's done that. I appreciate you guys, and have fun crafting. Go forth and craft.